Hey, it's bass season here at New Perspectives Music World headquarters, and I've got a whole bunch of basses I'm building right now. I'm going to share it all with you in this kind of series that's going to be coming together. We're going to start today with tackling two things, or at least beginning to tackle two things. One is my inherent bias against 5-string bass guitars. I've certainly built a whole bunch of them over the years, but they've always been custom orders, and I haven't just offered one as a product that was a la carte at the store. So I'm going to rectify that problem by creating a 5-string Lutz bass guitar that I'm so far pretty excited about. And I'm also developing this line of instruments, this sort of offset, angular, sort of space age looking instruments. You can see I have a guitar, I have a baritone, and I have a bass 6, and today I'm going to begin building a classic 34-inch bass guitar version of this design. So come along. Well, first I had to design the 5-string, and it's not just as simple as adding a string. The math changes a little bit, and then the proportions change a little bit too, so just putting a 5-string on a 4-string body doesn't necessarily work and look right, but there's just very subtle changes I had to do. I did all that digitally in my Vectric software, and now I've gone and I've glued up some blanks. I'm trying to save some wood and not have as much waste, although I usually cut the waste up to make things like this. So here's like a maple neck I have, and some maple fingerboard. This is all local stuff. I have some more maple, some local walnut, and maple here for a fingerboard. Then I have two blanks. I have this one which is glued up. I actually got this piece of mahogany that some guy was throwing away, believe it or not. Some of that local maple, and I put a top of chestnut on it. So this is going to be one of them. And then I have all these old butcher block tables that I'm still using up that are nice, quick blanks, and they make cool guitars. So I'm going to make one out of this too. Now I've designed all the files. I've created my cutting paths. Let's go over to everybody's favorite not woodworking tool, the CNC. It is real woodworking, I promise. I imagine most of you are on board with the CNC at this point. There's very few people that still kind of scoff at this machine or maybe have a misunderstanding of how it works. But basically what I look at the CNC as is it is a template follower, right? So, here's a template for a Lutz bass body I made. Here's a template for some router pockets. Here's a template for a headstock. This is all the stuff that a lot of guitar players, pre-CNC would use. They use the double-sided tape or whatever. They stick these down. They follow the templates to make the instrument. So now the only difference is I put all of my effort into making digital templates instead of these wooden templates. And so I have them inside the machine. And now instead of me having to hold the router and then adjust the depth and go again and all that stuff, or walk over the table saw, this just does it for me. That's it. I always say there's two woodworkers in the shop and one of them actually knows what it's doing. And so now that I have created my templates, instead of those, I'm going to put them into the machine. I'm going to cut those templates. But what's also cool about it is, like, if I want to use this template and put it on a piece of wood and trace it, and then I want to go do another one, I have to go and take it off and stick it on the next one and do it again. With this, I can actually do both of these next at the same time using the same templates because they're digital, and I'll show you what I mean. Now that I have this board all lined up and centered and ready to be cut, what I can do is I can find another spot on my CNC to mark this down, and then I can just jump back and forth from file to file. Well, it's the same file. Now, obviously, your CNC may be different, but if you're using Mach 3 or Mach 4, it's pretty easy. You can go to this tab up here that says Offsets, and right now I'm on this centered offset, which is 24.5 by 12.5, right in the dead center of my board. I can go over to this offset, and I'm going to change this number to, we'll say 6, just to make sure we get enough room. Actually, we'll go 6.5 because I'm weird like that. I like to be even. And I go to home out my machine. It's going to home out in a different location than where it just did now. There's my center for this one. So now by just going to that Offsets tab in my software, I can jump back and forth between these two spots and just run the same toolpath over and over again. As you can see, my CNC is actually big enough. If I were a little bit more efficient, I could put 3 or 4 necks on here. Right now I'm only doing 2, so that's all I need to worry about. And but just putting the proper stops. And I could also design that all out in my software. I could make like if I were doing this like say every day or like once a week, I was cutting 3 or 4 necks, I could make like an MDF template that just snaps onto my board that I can put my blanks into, and then I could just make one big file on the software that does it all for me without having to stop. But I work in such small batches and I'm always doing these variable things. Sometimes I'll have 2 different necks that'll be completely different CNC files, but they'll be using the same end mills in the same order. And so I'll stack up several projects like that and just, I mark them on the board so I don't get confused. Like, well, this is the 5-string, this is the 4-string, And then I just go through like one tool change, a whole bunch of cuts, go to the next tool change, a whole bunch of cuts. But let's just go ahead and cut these now. I'm just checking, making sure I got all these holes right and everything fits before I move my Z and mess everything up. And I can see that everything looks good. So I am ready to, although I do see that my alignment holes didn't fit into the smaller neck profile I made. So I'm glad I just caught that. So I need to go in and fix that, create a new guides file. So I can flip this over. We'll talk about that when we get to it. And I'm glad I caught that before I moved over and did the next one, so the next one can be correct. So now that I'm set with this one, I can go ahead and re-zero right here. What I'm trying to say here poorly is that when you change to your new offset, you will have to reset your Z height. The X and the Y are already programmed in, but the Z is not. So in this case, I'm manually typing it in, or you could use your tool to find your new height in your new location. Don't forget to do that. And now, in theory, I should be good to cut. Now that I'm ready to flip these over, these holes that I'm drilling will make more sense. What I'm going to do is drill the inverse of them directly into the wasteboard of my CNC, and then I'm going to use little dowels. I actually just use broken pencil pieces and stick them in the holes and stick them on and line them up, and that'll guarantee that everything is lined up so the two sides match up when I cut them together. If I was just basing it on some measurement, I could be off by a little bit or whatever, but this way, with these holes, I can really guarantee accuracy in my flip. So now to put the guides into the bed of the CNC, I just have to zero it out onto the bed. And you can see I have a lot of holes already here. And so what I do is I kind of just follow it along with a little Sharpie and mark them as they go so I don't get them confused with pre-existing holes. I need to cut a new wasteboard. This is getting near the end of its life. Taking the time to show you this because this is something I do all the time and I talk about all the time. So I figured I should put it in the video again. It's been a while. You see I have these little pieces of pencil. I can actually sort of save and use some of them again. That one's broken. I just pop those right into these holes. Next up with the holes. You see there's the ones on the edge are a little close, but I can just sort of, actually helps me sort of visually see them lined up. Now we're good to go with the back halves. As most of you know by now, I don't drop ads in the middle of my videos for a bunch of book subscriptions or delivery food services or whatever garbage that people are trying to sell to you on the internet right now. I am able to make these videos partly out of just my love of making videos, partly from the support I get over at patreon.com/timsway, and partly because so many of you are able and generous enough to buy some of the things that I make, which I sell over at squaretools.com. A lot of these tools that I developed over the years to make guitars and other things. And I also make and sell instruments. I know that most of you watching are watching because you want to build your own instruments. You don't want to, buy one built from me. But if you do want to buy one built by me, you can say, I know Tim Sway, and save 10% off everything at newperspectivesmusic.com. And guess what? I also sell things other than guitars, as well as some guitar parts and accessories like my hand wound pickups and some plans and stuff like that, all over newperspectivesmusic.com/timsway, and the I know Tim Sway code saves you 10% off everything there, as well as everything at squaretools.com. So knowing me is worth 10%. Following the same process as I described making the two necks, I made the two bodies at the same time too. Here you can see I changed my offsets and my stops and start spots to be side by side in the front, and I was able to just cut one body and move right on to the next. I create little tabs on each piece of work so it won't fly off the CNC when it gets cut out, and I cut those off by hand. Then you can see here I also did two fingerboards in the same process. In this case, I actually use masking tape and CA glue to make a two-sided tape of my own, and go through the process of creating the inlays, letting them dry, and then cutting out the fingerboards. And so now I don't need to create tabs because the whole thing is glued down to the fingerboard and then peels off pretty easily. But of course, the CNC is not a magic box. There's still plenty of sanding to do. Nowadays I also wind my own pickups, which really gives me the creative freedom to design the instrument the way I want it. And with the bulk of the parts cut out and the ones that I'm not making bought, I was able to sort of lay them out and start really seeing what these designs are going to look like in the real world. And I think they look good. So far, I'm real happy with how these are coming together, especially and surprisingly the 5-string. I've always just sort of been traditional in my bass playing, 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 traditional in my bass playing. I like 4 strings. I play the upright, and I know that that's an old school way of thinking about the instrument. So while I've made a bunch of custom 5 strings over the years, I haven't actually created a product 5-string, and so the lute seems like the perfect bass to start with that. And I'm really happy with the proportions and the way it's coming together. I think it's going to be an awesome bass. I love that giant humbucker. I can't wait to hear it. And I'm also real happy with the 4-string developing this line. Like I said before in other videos about these, they all want to be related, but they're not exactly the same. And so this body is a little bit different than the others. Trying to make just like a 4-string bass that could fit in any genre of music, because a lot of time when you get into these sort of weird shapes, they sort of scream like, oh, heavy metal, or oh, new wave. And I think that this instrument could fit in just about any band. Like I could see someone playing that bass in a country band and having it not look really odd, or a metal band. And that's kind of an important part of a design to me. I don't want to have my instruments pigeonholed into like, well, this is for prog rock guys, or this is for traditionalists, you know? So I think that design is kind of cool and different at the same time, but still, you know, fits into multiple genres. And I wonder what you think. Let me know in the comments. And I'll see you in the next update on these basses, as well as some of the other basses I got going on. Look at all these blanks I have here. 1, 2. Guess what these are going to be? That's right, more Apirons coming. Lots more. With some changes. Be good.